Welcome to Talking Points. My name is Dr. Stephen E. Gardner, and we have begun a new series that's entitled 5 Powerful Life-Winning Choices. And in the past couple of weeks, we dealt with loss. And last week in particular, we had a special segment on grieving in the context of loss. Let me tell you up front that if you've lost a loved one, you might want to go back, and watch that particular show. Or if there's any other broadcast that you've missed, you can always go to the website that you see there, www.drstephengardner.com, and you can go and look at all the previous podcasts. They're on iTunes, and they're also on YouTube. Go back and view any of those segments for your own edification. Today, we're going to talk about a brand new topic, and that topic is entitled Vision. Change your vision, change your life. The power of right perception. Change your vision, change your life. The power of right perception. Now, Webster's has several definitions for the word vision. Some of them pertain to more of the natural aspect, and some of them pertain to the spiritual aspect. So we're going to cover all those definitions. And today we're going to focus probably more so on the natural side of vision, and then next week we're going to deal with the spiritual side of vision. Webster's definition of vision: something seen in a dream, trance, or ecstasy, especially a supernatural appearance that conveys a revelation. It is a thought, concept, or object formed by the imagination. It is a manifestation to the senses of something immaterial. Webster goes on to describe and define vision in this way: it is the act or power of imagination. Now, you notice the word imagination has the root word image. So when you talk about vision, obviously you're speaking of image. And the power of imagination is the mind's ability to create images. And we do with our natural sight as well. But we're talking about the power of imagination. What you can create in your own mind, what you can visualize, what you can conceive, what you can perceive within the context of your own experience, whether it's subjective or the like. We all have the power of imagination. We're able to imagine things. Also, when we talk about the definition of vision, we're talking about the mode of seeing or conceiving. I heard one famous positive thinking speaker say that what the mind of man can conceive and believe, the mind of man can also achieve. And so it's important that we understand the faculties that God has blessed us with and to use them for His glory and also for personal benefit. Another term or definition for vision is unusual discernment or foresight. Unusual discernment or foresight. Sometimes I've heard people talk about a gut feeling, or they just have this intuitive aspect to where they can sense or they can see that if they employ a particular path or if they do a particular thing, that is going to work in their favor. And sometimes there's not any valid reasoning for that. It's just unusual discernment or foresight. Another definition for vision is it is a direct mystical awareness of the supernatural, usually in visible form. It's a direct mystical awareness of the supernatural, usually in visual form. Now I'm going to talk about different ways by which we obtain vision. One of the first ways that we obtain vision is out of experience. So we're going to talk about vision born out of experience. Some experiences teach you to look at things differently, whether it be achievement or whether it be failure. If you ever played any type of sports and your particular team and you're won the championship, that sense of accomplishment, that achievement causes you to look and see things differently. You might be able to reflect back on what it took for you and for your team to get to that point. So that experience of achievement gives you you're able to do an after action, reflective about what enabled us to get there. But it's usually after the achievement that we begin to see things. Also, failure is an experience that enables us to see things. We can see, well, I should have did this, or I could have done that. The very experience of failure is an awakening. I'm thinking about one particular passage of scripture, and it's called the prodigal son, and you can read it somewhere in the Gospels, and I'm just going to quote the story. I'm going to tell the narrative. And so we find this young man who had a brother, and he had made up in his mind that he was ready to go. I'm going to go. I want to do my own thing. Give me my portion. So he asked his father to give him his portion. So his father gave him his portion and gave his brother his portion. And he took off on his journey. Well, on this journey, he involved himself in all kinds of indiscretions and haphazard living to where he had blew everything that he had. He had failed in the sense that he squandered all of his possessions that he had, and he found himself in an hog pen, eating in poverty. And while he was there, his sense of failure, his awareness of defeat gave him an aha moment. And he said, I'm going back to my father's house. It was much better for me back there. And he made up in his mind that he's going to return to his father's house. And when his father met him halfway and said, look, I just want to basically be a servant. I don't want to, I messed up, I blew it. And his father forgave him and threw a party for him. But the idea here is that when he hit rock bottom, his eyes came open. Sometimes, that when we hit our head, that's right, when we hit our head, we see stars. Or if our head gets hit by some blow, then we're going to have an awakening. And so failure is a way by which we can obtain vision. We can see what we could have, would have, should have, and we can see the error of our ways and make different choices about what we're going to do with our lives in the future. Now, there are certain cliches that speak of this type of vision, that's born out of experience. You've heard this one before. Wisdom is the best teacher. Or hindsight is 2020. We can always look back and see what we could have done and what we should have done. We can see clearly now. Or this one. Boy, I won't do that one again. Sometimes we just realize that there's certain things that you just won't do anymore because of that experience. Then we have the kind of vision that's born out of setback or misfortune. I want to say this, that some setbacks are actually setups. Some setbacks are actually setups. And we saw that and we've heard that when we discussed in our first segment where we talked about Joseph, who had this dream and he saw himself in a position of rulership, but then he got set back. He got, as we learned, he got thrown into the pit because his brothers threw him there, sold him into slavery. He got thrown into the pot because he maintained his integrity in Potiphar's house. Then finally he got put when he was able to interpret the dream of the ruler. And so that setback actually was a setup. And he came to this realization and he told his brothers when he met up with them later is that what you meant for evil, God meant for good. Sometimes there are setbacks or misfortunes that are actually setups. You know, we didn't plan on it. I remember this particular movie that came out years ago is called Karate Kid. And this young lad had went over to this Oriental country and wanted to learn karate. And so when he met his master, one of the things that his master told him to do was to go out there and wash the car, to go over and mop the floor. And after a while of mopping the floor and washing the car, he approached his master and said, why are you, this is not what I come over here for. I didn't plan on this. And so what appeared to be a setback, what appeared to be something that was totally irrelevant to his purpose was actually a setup. He learned as he developed his skills as a martial artist that the muscles that were employed through mopping the floor and washing the car were developed. And therefore, it enabled him to have the flexibility to be able to do the kind of routines that he learned in martial arts. So some setbacks are actually setups. Sometimes the things that we're presently going through is really not about what we're going through at the moment. It's about the preparation of what we're going through for the future. We talked about in our first segment that the win is greater than the loss. And sometimes there are sacrifices in our life that are greater than what we are losing. Here's one. The path between point A and point B is never a straight line. I'll say that again. The path between point A and point B is never a straight line. I call it the dynamic detour. The dynamic detour. And so you can have the best laid plans about how you want to execute something. We see that in the military. You may have that in business or just in life in general. And then you want to get from point A to point B. And sometimes you have to take a detour. We've all been out on the road and been driving. And one of the things about driving on the road, why is it that they pick the most inopportune times to do road construction? And so you have to take these detours. And therefore, if that detour, it becomes a time waster, as it were, or it becomes something that we didn't plan on. And so you have to make necessary adjustments. So that's the way it is in life. That sometimes we have to take these necessary detours, this dynamic detour to make necessary adjustments just to get to point B. So detours are not always a bad thing. Sometimes they are a good thing. I heard there was an old gospel song that says, Lord, don't move my mountain, but give me the strength to climb. And that just kind of speaks in two different ways. Number one, it speaks to the indictment against our generation, especially as Americans, and especially American Christians, is that we want everything quick. We want it moved out of the way. We want it to not exist. We just want the quantum leap to where we're supposed to be or where we desire to go. So the song says, Lord, don't move my mountain, but give me the strength to climb. The idea is this, and this is the afterthought, that if God gives me the strength to climb this mountain, I've got the strength that I need to climb many more. And so sometimes, rather than trying to bypass, rather than trying to go a different route, sometimes we need to approach the very thing head on. And God's ability to enable us to climb in ways that we never thought we could. We will discover our personal capacity, our ability to do things that we didn't think that we were capable of doing. And the last thing about a vision born out of setback and misfortune is delay does not always mean denial. Sometimes I've heard people say that, God may not come when you want him, but he's always right on time. And so just because it's a delay does not necessarily mean that you've been denied. We learned in the story of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus that they had employed the Lord to come and heal their brother. In fact, they said, Lord, if he had been here, my brother would not have died. And so that delay that they thought led to the type of misfortune, the type of grief, and the type of sadness of Lazarus' death. But that delay did not mean denial. God still, through Christ, rose Lazarus from the dead. Another type of vision is what I want to call vision born out of maturity. Naturally, as we grow older, we should see things differently. Consequently, our behavior will always correspond to how we see things in our mind. However, this is not always the case. Let's consider this passage out of 1 Corinthians 13, verse 11. And it says, when I was a child, my speech, my feelings, and my thinking were all those of a child. Now that I have grown up, I have no more use for childish ways. Now let's stop and think about that for a moment. I'm sure we all have people that we were acquainted with or people that we grew up with that you used to hang out on the corner, and here you are some 10 decades later, and some of you are a little bit older than that, 5 decades later, and those same homies are still hanging out on the corner as if they haven't grown up yet. They're still trying to be Mac Daddy. They're still trying to do the kind of things that they thought they could then. And so they just have not grown up yet. So natural age does not always invoke maturity. It's about making those choices. And that choice is to grow up. So when Paul says, when I was a child, my speech, feelings, and thinking were just like a child. When you grow up, you should change your speech, change your feelings, and change your thinking. And set aside childish ways. So in other words, that's vision that's born out of maturity. You start to see things from a different perspective. I remember when my parents would tell me certain things, boy, one of these days you're going to see what I'm talking about. Or you think you know it all right now. And I did, like most of us did, and like those who still have children in the house. For some reason they think that they know more than you, or because that what they're experiencing, we're not experiencing. But believe it or not, the very things that they experienced then, that they're experiencing now, we experienced then. And we pull some of the same tricks and stunts. When I got older, and when you got older, you came to realize that, you know what? I need to quit acting like that, or I don't need to act like that anymore. So this vision born out of maturity. Let me talk about a couple of things here that deals with self. And the first one is self-esteem. It's like a vision. It's like an inner vision. It is the inner appraisal of how one sees themselves in light of someone or something else. It is the inner appraisal of how one sees themselves in light of someone or something else. It is a mental estimate of an individual's capacity in light of a challenge that they are faced with. Is the glass half empty? Is the glass half full? So self-esteem is like an inner vision. I remember Stevie Wonder came out with a song back in the 70s. It was called Inner Vision. So yeah, I'm dating myself when I talk about that. But there's a truth to inner vision. And one of the aspects of inner vision is how you see yourself. How you see yourself. Let's deal with the story of Joshua and Caleb and the 10 spies. And here we're reading from Numbers 13, verses 25 through 29. And this is when God had given Moses instruction to send out 12 spies to spy out the land that he was going to give them. And in verse 25, it begins like this. And at the end of the 40 days, they returned from spying out the land. And they came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the Israelites in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him, quote unquote, we came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is the fruit. Yet the people who live in the land are strong, and their towns are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. And the Amalekites lived in the land of Negev, and the Hittites and the Jebusites, and the Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live by the sea and along the Jordan. So now we find that they're giving this report and they're assessing the people and they're comparing themselves to the people that they see. Let's read on. So beginning at verse 30, but Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, quote unquote, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. Then the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. So they brought to the Israelites an unfavorable report, or in some versions says an evil report. They brought an unfavorable report of the land that they had spied out, saying, quote unquote, the land that we have gone through as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are of great size. So they had exaggerated, they had blown the assessment from them being a great people and strong people in fortified cities to the point that they're calling those people cannibals, that they eat their people. And so, but yet two of the spies had a different vision, as it were. They had a different assessment. They had a different level of esteem about their personal capacity. And they said, let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it. Joshua and Caleb saw the glass half full, and the other 10 spies saw the glass half empty. And it goes on to say in verse 33, there we saw the Nephilim. The Anakites came from the Nephilim. And to ourselves we seemed like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. So now, really, the truth is they really didn't want to go. And they were just making excuses as to why they should not go, because they had a different estimate of their personal capacity. They disregarded what God had given them the land, and surely they have been brought out of the wilderness. Surely they have crossed the Red Sea, and God has been with them miraculously. Why can't God be with them in a miraculous way now? They began to see themselves in a different light. And obviously in this case, the 10 had influence over the many. And the 2, Joshua and Caleb, their report got discarded, and God judged those and did not permit people that believed that way to actually enter into the land of promise. Let's talk about another type of self, and I want to call this self-glory. It is an overappreciation of an individual's capacity. It is an unhealthy vision of oneself. Delusions of grandeur versus having an authentic vision. Delusions of grandeur versus having an authentic, sober-minded vision. Let me say this. Some people are so bent on having fame and success that they will exaggerate ordinary accomplishments to make themselves look great in the eyes of other people. Or they will manufacture a successful event that never happened. Here is the answer to that. Romans 12, verse 3. For by grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think of yourself more highly than you ought to think, but to think with sober judgment, each according to the measure of faith that God has assigned. So let's not get caught up in an over-appreciation of our individual capacity. Let's have a healthy vision of ourselves. Let's not be deluded by these unrealistic delusions of grandeur. And let's not become so bent on fame and success that we will wind up exaggerating about those accomplishments. But let us think soberly, as God has given each of us a measure of faith. Well, I've concluded part 1 on vision. And as we've talked about today, we see that we focus primarily on mental vision. We focus on the natural side of vision. Next week, we're going to deal with vision, part 2. And we will talk about when God's vision becomes your vision, the power of divine optics. May God bless you, and I trust that you were edified by today's lesson. We'll see you again next week.